Today we start a 6-week journey through the life of Moses. So I thought maybe we would start, maybe the best way to start is to kind of find out, what do we know already about Moses? So I'm going to let you just tell me, what do you know about Moses, other than maybe what we just read?
Super famous.
Whoa, wait a minute, all of a sudden everybody's done.
God gave him the Ten Commandments.
All right, Moses was the one that God had given the 10 Commandments to, so that Moses could share them with God's people. Okay?
Super famous.
Super famous. Yeah, if you were to just say, hey, list all the people in the Bible, Moses would come up somewhere on the top 10.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. Okay. All right?
Met God with a burning bush.
Okay. He met God, had an encounter with God at the burning bush. Okay?
He was saved by women in the Bible, which is kind of unusual.
God elevating women to a point where they were used to save this champion of the faith. Okay?
Got the slaves freed.
Yeah, he got the slaves free.
Killed an Egyptian.
Killed an Egyptian. Okay? Sure.
I learned a lot from my favorite movie of all time, The Ten Commandments.
Ah, okay.
He's standing at the burning bush, and God says, I am that I am. Do you believe? Right?
Ah, okay. There is something about that line. Whether you're reading it in Scripture or hearing it in the movie or whatever, I am that I am. Okay? Well, over the next 6 weeks, we're going to learn a lot more about Moses, and I trust that you will be able to be a part of each of our weeks of study. The Sunday school class, the adult Sunday school class, will be going through the same material, and they'll be showing some interesting videos that actually deal with the land and how Moses was used by God. But before Moses was born, and we saw this in the first text, the pharaohs, the Egyptians, were concerned about the Israelites. They were concerned about them so much that they decided to put them into slavery, and they required them to do some pretty amazing things. If any of you have been or seen pictures of the buildings in the Middle East, the Sphinx, the pyramids, that's pretty amazing stuff. And it's, we sit there and look at some of the stones that were used in the pyramids and thought, oh, no big deal. We just bring in a tractor and no, they didn't have that stuff. We're talking some pretty brutal work for the children of Israel to be able to build these towers and temples and pyramids just to honor the gods of Egypt. Well, the folks in Egypt were a little concerned because it seemed as though that the Israelites were having quite a few children. And they figured, we got to stop this, because sooner or later they're going to be bigger than we are, population-wise, and the last thing we want is a revolt on our hands. So Pharaoh sent out a decree that said, take out the male babies. And then, obviously, there's only females. Last time I checked, you needed a male and a female to have more babies, and so that would limit the population. But there's some interesting things that I found in reading that just really kind of puzzled me. If you take out all the men, or all the boy babies that will soon grow into men, who's going to do all the hard labor? Oh, somebody's going like, gosh, I didn't think about that. Well, I mean, at that point, the men were doing a lot of the hard labor, the women were not doing as much, and all of a sudden, now all these beautiful architectural dreams were the possibility of more of them being built was kind of being undercut by the fact that we're not going to have many more men. And so there is a time where you sit there and you might look and say, boy, this really sounds good. This is a brilliant idea. And then you get down the road and go, well, maybe that wasn't such a great idea after all. Because now we don't have any guys to do the labor. And so the Egyptians were really struggling, and they tried to figure some things out. And really, probably the reason why I wanted to title this "Thinking Outside the Box" is, what seemed like a brilliant idea kind of came back and bit them. It really wasn't such a great idea after all. But yet, that's the way the Egyptians were going to try to work this. Now, the Egyptians had called in 2 people. They called in the 2 midwives. And they thought, all right, we're going to get some assistance in this plan that we have from one of the Israelites' own people. We're going to get these midwives and we're going to threaten them. We're going to demand them. We're going to order them to say, don't let the male babies live. Now, I don't know about you, but all of a sudden we have a situation where these midwives their job is to bring life into the world, and now they are told, no. Half of them you can bring in. The other half, kill them. Pretty brutal stuff. And the midwives were told about this, and they knew it was wrong. They knew this was not the right thing to do. And as I read that, I had to stop and think. I thought, have I ever been told to do something by a boss, by a teacher, by somebody that I knew was wrong? I mean, I remember when I was in college. I had a college class. It was an American history class. It was 175 to 200 people in it. And, I'm just trying to get along in the class, trying to get some decent grade out of it. Well, this class was in an auditorium, and there were some freshman students sitting up above me, and they're passing the answers back and forth during the test. And I'm hearing this. And I kind of turned around and looked and thinking, what in the world? So afterwards, being the godly, righteous person that I am, thank you all for laughing. I decided to go to the professor and said, you know what, I'm working really hard, I'm studying real hard, and these guys are just sharing answers. The professor's answer to me has never left me. He said, so what do you want me to do about it? Well, last time I checked, you are in charge in this room, aren't you? But I figured, well, I've done my part. A couple of those students that were doing that, I know, ended up with A's. I ended up with a C. I just kind of figured, well, I did my part, right? I just didn't know what else to do. But there were other times where the boss would tell me, in a business setting, I want you to do this. I said, that's illegal. You can't do that. He said, just do it. I can't. And there was, and fortunately that incident didn't get me fired. But I know other people who have actually stood up to a boss and say, no, I'm not doing what you asked me to do because it's wrong, and have gotten fired for it. Well, so this whole thing, I mean, this comes back to maybe an issue that we've seen recently, the civil disobedience. I mean, obviously it was a big thing. We think about that during the civil rights era, but there was this big thing about civil disobedience. How do you disobey the rule, the law, and not get in trouble? Or if you do get in trouble, what are you willing to put up with? And it is pretty amazing to see how people respond. Now we see how Moses' family responded. We saw how the nursemaids had responded, the midwives. We saw how they responded. But there's another great example of how people respond to things that are going on in their world that we need to, just kind of, it's got to be responded to. Acacia's going to pull up a video. It is actually a book that was written based on a true story. And it is using some of the most creative thinking outside the box to diffuse a hateful situation that I've ever seen. Acacia?
The day was bright and sunny as most May days tend to be in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. A dozen men put on their suits and quickly took their places in white robes and those tall and pointed hoods that hid their faces. Their feet fell down in rhythm as they started their parade. They raised their fists into the air, they bellowed and they brayed. They loved to stir the people up. They loved when they were taunted. They didn't mind the anger. It's exactly what they wanted. And as they came around the corner, sure enough, the people roared. But they couldn't quite believe their ears. It seemed to be support. Had Knoxville finally seen the light? Were people coming around? The men thought for a moment that they'd found their kind of town. But then they turned their eyes to where the cheering had its source. As one, their shoulders crumpled when they saw the mighty force. The crowd had painted faces, and some had tacky clothes. Their hair and hats outrageous. Each had a bright red nose. The clowns had come in numbers to enjoy the grand parade, and they laughed and danced that other clowns had come to town that day. And then the marchers shouted, and the clowns all strained to hear, each one tuned in intently with a hand cupped to an ear. White power, screamed the marchers, and they raised their fisted hands. The clowns leaned in and listened like they couldn't understand, and then one held up his finger and helped all the others see the point of all this yelling, and they joined right in with glee. White flour, the clowns shouted, and they reached inside their clothes. They pulled out bags and tore them, and huge clouds of powder rose. They poured it on each other, and they threw it in the air. It got all over baggy clothes and multicolored hair. Now all but just a few of them were joining in the jokes. You could almost see the marchers turning red beneath white cloaks. They wanted to look scary. They wanted to look tough. One rushed right at the clowns in rage and was hauled away in cuffs. But the others chanted louder, marching on around the bend. The clowns all marched on too, of course, supporting their new friends. White power, came the marchers' cry. They were not amused. The clowns grew still and thoughtful. Well, perhaps they'd been confused. They huddled and consulted, this bright and silly crowd. They listened quite intently. Then one said, I've got it now. "White flowers!" screamed the happy clown, and all the rest joined in. The air was filled with flowers, and they laughed and danced again. Everyone loves flowers, and white's a pretty sort. I can't think of a better cause for people to support. Green flower stems went flying like small arrows from bad archers, and white petals covered everything, including the mad marchers. And then a very tall clown called the others to attention. He choked down all his chuckles and said, "Friends, I have to mention that what with all this mirth and fun, it's sort of hard to hear, but now I know the cause that these paraders hold so dear." "Tight showers," the clown blurted, as he hit his head in wonder. He held up a camp shower, and the others all got under. Or at least they tried to get beneath. They strained, but couldn't quite. There wasn't room for all of them. They pushed, but it was tight. "White power," came the mad refrain, quite carefully pronounced. The clowns consulted once again. Then a woman clown announced, "I've got it. I'm embarrassed that it took so long to see, but what these marchers march for is a cause quite dear to me." "Wife power," she exclaimed, and all the other clowns joined in. They shook their heads and laughed at how erroneous they'd been. The women clowns were hoisted up on shoulders of the others. Some pulled on wedding dresses, chanting, "Here's to wives and mothers." The men in robes were sullen. They knew they'd been defeated. They yelled a few more times, and then they finally retreated. And when they'd gone, a kind policeman turned to all the clowns and offered them an escort through the center of the town. The day was bright and sunny, as most May days tend to be, in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. People joined the new parade. The crowd stretched out for miles. The clowns passed out more flowers and made everybody smile. And what would be the lesson of that shiny southern day? Can we understand the message that the clowns sought to convey? Seems that when you're fighting hatred, hatred's not the thing to use. So here's to those who march on in their big red floppy shoes.
Not exactly thinking within the realm that most of us think. Pretty outside the box thinking. Pretty amazing that they thought, all right, we're going to take this rally, this march that is meant for hate, and turn it into something fun. We're going to take this march that is meant to scare people and turn it into a parade where we're going to do something joyous and happy. Well, I'm not quite sure that this type of option would have worked in Egypt. But I do know that it works. The Egyptians had a law. The midwives said, "We will stand against you because we know it is wrong." Just like the clowns did in the march at Knoxville 11 years ago. That is a true story. They couldn't get involved. They couldn't do a march through Egypt. That probably wouldn't have gone too well with the pharaohs. But yet there was something that they had thought that they needed to do to make a difference in the experience that they were going through. But you notice that it wasn't just the midwives in this event where they were told to kill the boy babies. They were not the only ones involved. There were some people involved behind the scenes, if you will. I mean, Moses' mother was obviously involved. Moses' older sister was involved. Moses' older sister, she knew exactly what the Egyptians had said. And when Moses was put in the basket and set down the Nile, what happened? The sister went running alongside the Nile to keep an eye on brother. Kept an eye on her brother. And then when brother was picked up out of the reeds, picked up along the side of the Nile, by the Egyptian princess, she didn't hesitate for 1 minute. She immediately ran over to the princess. Now, that wouldn't have normally happened. But she ran over to the princess and says, "Do you want me to get you an Israelite mother that could nurse this baby?" Holy smokes. She was way mature beyond my years. Brilliant. And the princess says, "Well, yeah, I can't nurse the baby. Yeah, get somebody that'll take care of the baby." So sister goes back and gets mama. Now, this is the crazy part about the beginning of Moses' life. Moses was sent in a basket down the Nile by his mother to save his life. Who raised Moses in his early years? His mother. How amazing is this? I honestly believe that God has a fabulous sense of humor. He's got to be sitting there going, "Pull one over on them tonight." Had to. And it was just one of those things, and so the sister was involved, the mother was involved, the midwives were involved. All of them were involved in this plot to keep little boy Moses alive. And what did it come down to? Well, in the next 5 weeks, we're going to find out what that decision meant in the history of the Israelites. What did that mean for the history of us? How did we be affected by that? I saw what the daughter or the sister of Moses had risked by running up and telling the princess, "Hey, I know of an Egyptian woman, or I know of an Israelite woman that'll take care of that baby." There was a risk there. And there was a risk that Moses' mother would be found out and killed, and the baby be killed. There were risks all over the place. So maybe one of the things we need to give up during Lent is our fear of taking a risk. Maybe what we need to give up is our fear that the world is more powerful than God. Maybe what we need to say is, if God calls me to do something, as crazy as it might sound, I'm willing to take a risk for God. Is giving up the fear of that is that something that you really think would be valuable, profitable, helpful to the church, to fellow Christians, to give up during Lent? Let's see what we can give up so that our lives and the lives of our brothers and sisters and the lives of our church and other churches and the lives of people will be better because we gave up a fear. Let's pray. Father God, thank you that in spite of all that is going on around us, we know that you will walk with us if we're obedient to you. We know that you will be there with us to be able to give us the strength, the courage to be able to follow you no matter what the cost. Lord, use this story that we'll go through in the next 6 weeks of Moses and allow us to apply it to our own lives so that we can see how we can make a difference in the kingdom of God. For we ask it in Christ's name.